In this video, I'd like to have some real fun with you. I hope you'll enjoy this. This is a letter written by an Aristeas who worked for the ruler, if you want to call it, the Greek ruler in Egypt, and when Egypt was under the Greeks. And this person, Aristeas, went to visit Jerusalem and take gifts from the king. And that's when they were working on the Septuagint text. So they write this letter back about what it was like being in Jerusalem. I think it's fascinating. This is from about 250, 270 BC, so long before Jesus. And they're talking about Jerusalem. And I think it's so fascinating because I'm going to show you some pictures of Jerusalem here just before we start. And you'll get an idea that Jerusalem of our day, there are no mountains, not even slightly. There's not even hardly a hill, if you want to call it that. It's more or less just rolling little hills, I guess, but there's no mountains. There's nothing great. There's no grandeur. There's nothing at all. So then we read what this person, this Greek person, who was like a top diplomat, like top, went and visited Jerusalem. And this is their report, the part that I'm going to read. You can read the whole thing yourself. I'll leave the link down below. So I'm not going to read all of it, but I'm going to read a good chunk of it. I hope you'll enjoy this. It's fascinating, actually, just fascinating. So the description of Jerusalem and its vicinity. I have given thee this description, as I considered that a record of these presents was required, the presents they were taking to the Jewish people at the time. And the next portion of my letter contains an account of our journey to Elazar. Now, Elazar was the high priest at the time in Jerusalem. But first I will indicate the configuration of the whole country. When we reached the district, we beheld the city lying in the center of the whole of Judea, upon a mountain which rose to a great height. Okay, again, I'm going to show you a couple more of these pictures from Jerusalem of our day. And okay, remember what this person said. In Judea, upon a mountain which rose to a great height. And I think they understood what a mountain was and what a hill was and what flat land was. And so I'll leave that with you. Upon its crest stood the temple in splendor, with its 3 enclosing walls, more than 70 cubits high, their breadth and length corresponding to the structure of the edifice. The whole was built with a magnificence and liberality beyond all precedent. Now, this is a person, as I said, a top Greek diplomat who'd been all over the ancient world, Alexandria, or the leaders of the Greeks that had taken over Egypt. And so they're talking about this library in Alexandria, and they want the Hebrew scriptures or laws brought into that library. So the whole was built with magnificence and liberality beyond all precedent. So it was an incredible place. The lavish expenditure of money was apparent even in the great doorway and in its framework of doorposts and in the stability of its lintel. And the fashion of the curtain bore a very close resemblance to a door, the woven hanging being kept in incessant motion by the current of wind underneath, because they were up on this height. There was a lot of wind keeping this huge curtain, always moving. For while the current took its rise from the ground, current of air, the swell extended to the upper and taunter part of the curtain. And the effect was a beautiful spectacle from which it is hard to tear oneself away. And the altar was built of a size in keeping with the place and with the sacrifices which were consumed by the fire. And the ascent to it was on a like scale. The place was approached by a gentle slope from a proper regard for decency. Because remember, in those days, the Temple Mount and all those things, they didn't have stairs going up so that the garments didn't show. So it was more of a platform going up, from what I understand. And the ministering priests were clad in coats of fine linen reaching to the ankles. And the house looks toward the east, and its back is turned westwards. And the whole floor is paved and slopes away in the right directions, so as to admit the influx of water with which it is flushed to wash away the blood from the sacrifices. For many thousands of cattle are offered on the feast days. So you can imagine, many thousands of cattle are offered on the feast days. And there is an unfailing supply of water, because a rich natural spring bubbles up within the temple area. And there are also wonderful underground reservoirs, passing description. And these, as was explained to me, extended at a distance of 5 furlongs. So 5 furlongs, not a term we use anymore. I looked it up. 5 furlongs is about almost a kilometer, or about 2/3 of a mile. So that's where all this blood and stuff, it never was seen. It came off the sacrifices, went down with all this gushing water from this source. They had this rich spring they had, and it was taken away. So you never noticed it, all the blood from all these animals. These, as was explained to me, extended at a distance of 5 furlongs all around the site of the temple, and had innumerable pipes attached to them, since the channels converge on every side. It was explained also how all of these soldered with lead to the ground, and the sides and over them was laid a great mass of plaster, so that everything is made secure, and they have numerous outlets at the base of the temple, which are invisible to all except the actual ministrants. And in this way, all the vast accumulation of sacrificial blood is swept away in the twinkling of an eye. And having myself been convinced as to the nature of the reservoirs, I will explain how I reached that conviction. They led me more than 4 furlongs out of the city, so outside the city. It took them almost half a mile away to see where this outflow of blood and water went and fed into the creeks and rivers of the place. And at a certain place bade me to stoop down and listen to the rushing noise of meeting of the waters, and thus was the magnitude of the receptacles made evident to me as I have described them. And the priest's ministration in its exhibition of physical strength and in its orderly and silent performance could in no way be surpassed, for they all had of their own free will undergo labors required much endurance, and each had his appointed task. And their service is without interruption, some carrying wood, and others having charge of oil, and others of fine flour, and others of the spices, while others again offer the burnt offerings of the flesh, displaying here an extraordinary power. For they grip with both hands the legs of the calves, each animal weighing well nigh over 2 talents, and then with both hands and with wonderful dexterity fling the beast to a considerable height, and never fail to plant it on the altar. The sheep and goats are likewise remarkable for their weight and fat. For those whose duty it is to always select such are without blemish and of exceeding fatness, and then the offering already described is performed, and there's place set apart for them to rest. And then it goes on about this. And they say, but everything is offered, performed with awe, and in a manner worthy of the divine majesty. And when we beheld Elazar, in the course of his ministration and his apparel, the luster lent by the wearing of the coat wherewith he is clad, and by the precious stones which encircle it, we were struck with great amazement. For there are bells of gold around the border of his long robe, giving out a peculiar musical sound, and on either side of these are pomegranates embroidered in gay colors of a marvelous hue, and he was girt with a rich and magnificent girdle, woven in the fairest colors, and on his breast he wears what is called the oracle, wherein are set 12 stones of diverse kinds, enclosed in gold, bearing the names of the heads of the tribes, according to the original order, each of them flashing forth in indescribable fashion in its own natural hue. And on his head he has what is called the turban, and over this the inimitable mitre, the consecrated diadem, wearing in relief upon the plate of gold in holy letters the name of God, set between his eyebrows, full of glory. Such is the raiment worn by him who is judged worthy of these things in the public services. This is fascinating. I mean, I read this not because it really shows you where Jerusalem is, but it's amazing just to read. Of course, the scriptures talk about the temple and that kind of thing, but not in this kind of descriptive fashion. It's fascinating to see when you think about the sacrifices that were done and the amount of blood and the washing and the cleansing and all the work. He says that there were like 500 men doing this work and they took their turns working in without speaking and just getting all this work done. I confidently affirm that any man who witnesses the spectacle which I have described will experience an amazement and wonder beyond description, and will be profoundly moved in his mind at the sanctity attaching to every detail. To obtain an accurate knowledge of everything, we ascended to the citadel of the city, which lies hard by, watched with spectacle. The citadel is situated on a very lofty spot, so very far up, and is fortified with several towers, which are constructed up to their highest points of great blocks of stone as a defense, so we're informed, to the precincts of the temple, in order that in case of any attack or revolution or invasion of an enemy, no one might effect an entrance within the walls which surround the house. For there are engines for discharging missiles and machines of various kinds on the towers of the citadel, and the place commands the enclosing walls aforementioned, and the towers are guarded by the most trusted men who have wrought great achievement in their country's service. So it's interesting that when King David went and took the city of Jerusalem from the Jebusites, it was not an easy thing to do. It took them, well, all the way from the time of Moses and Joshua coming in to King David to take the city of Jerusalem because it was so well fortified, even in that time. And these had orders not to quit the citadel except on the feast days, and then only in turn, nor did they suffer anyone to enter. And even when any injunction was given by their leader to admit any persons as sightseers, great care was exercised, as was shown in our case. For although we were unarmed and only in two in number, they could hardly be brought to admit us to witness the offering of the sacrifices. That they, although numbering 500 men, would not admit more than 5 persons at the same time, for the citadel was one protection of the temple, and its builder had thus securely fortified its tower of defense. The extent of the city is moderate. Now he's talking of Jerusalem itself. Its circuit being about 40 furlongs. So remember that a furlong, so about 6 or 7 furlongs make a mile. So this was in circumference about 6 miles, 7 miles in circumference. And the arrangement of its towers and of the thoroughfares which pass out between reminds one of a theatre, the resemblance extending to the cross streets which are seen from below and some above in the usual manner of a theatre. For the ground is irregular, as the city is built on a mountain. Remember, I'm going to show you again some of these pictures of Jerusalem, just so you get that's the Jerusalem of our day. And think, is this person describing the same place? Because I don't, for me, see any mountains, hardly even really more than a very small hill. And there are also stairways leading to the cross streets, for some persons take their way along the higher level and others underneath, and the distinction and means of journeying being made for the sake of those who are undergoing usual purifications, to prevent them from coming into contact with any forbidden thing. So it seems they had streets that were just for the people that were going to the temple, and others where all the common things of the city took place. And it was not without reason that the original founders built the city of convenient proportions, but from a wise insight. For as the country is extensive and fair, and some parts, namely those in Samaria, so called, and those adjoining the country of the Idumeans, are level plains, while the other parts are mountainous. Remember, mountainous. So go look at your Jerusalem of today, and he's going to describe the area mountainous. And we know what mountains are, whether it's the Rocky Mountains, the Himalaya Mountains, mountains in Africa, along the whole east side of Africa and all over Africa. There's mountains. There's mountains in South America. There's mountains all over the world. So we know what mountains are. And this person knew what mountains are because they're from Greece and they knew the mountains of Turkey. They knew the mountains all through their journeyings. Namely, those adjoining the country of Judea. The inhabitants must devote their unremitting attention to agriculture and the care of the soil, in order that the mountain dwellers also may thereby obtain a fair crop. So it seems that they had people that lived in the mountains, like in Jerusalem, but they had all these other people that their duty was to do the farming and keep the food coming. So the city and the farming people had their food and kept the nation going. And in this way, cultivation of every sort is carried on, and an abundant harvest reaped throughout the whole of the district above mentioned. Then he goes on talking about Alexandria and other cities and how they've had to restrict people. I guess at the time the kings would start to restrict the people from the rural areas to only be able to come into the city for 20 days because they didn't want them coming in and leaving all the farms, because then there wouldn't be any food. So they kept the people on the farms out on the farms and wouldn't allow them into the city. So now he digresses back, or after that digression, talking about cities and how the rural issues and those things of the day. He says, "We have been led into this digression by Eleazar's admirable exposition to us of the principles to which we have referred. Their industry in agriculture is indeed great, for their country is thickly planted with olive trees." He didn't say just a few groves. He says their country is thickly planted with olive groves and is rich in cereal produce and pulse, in vines also, and honey in abundance. So a land flowing with milk and honey. And again, I'll show some pictures of Jerusalem back from the 1900s and the whole area, the Levant, all the area around Jerusalem. So you get an idea that there weren't a lot of trees, there weren't a lot of vines, honey hardly at all, and they had a very hard time producing much of anything in that area at the time. Now there is irrigation in Israel in modern days, and that has allowed more of course crops. But really, back in the day, it was not able to support more than a few 100,000 people in the whole Levant area. It was not a rich area. For their country is thickly planted with olive trees, and is rich in cereal produce and pulse, in vines and honey in abundance, fruit trees of other kinds, and palms are beyond reckoning with them. Not the odd one, but beyond reckoning. And there are cattle in abundance of all sorts, and rich pastures for them. And so they rightly recognized that the rural districts needed a dense population, and they constructed the city and the villages in correct proportions. And a great mass of spices, precious stones, and gold is conveyed by the Arabs into the district. For the country, being suited for cultivation, is also adapted for commerce, and the city is skilled in many arts and has no lack of any wares that are carried across the sea, for it has havens well suited which supply its needs. Now I'm believing for me that these goods are coming across, you can call it the Red Sea, or down into the Indian Ocean, from Arabia and all over the world, coming into this area. So remember, from some of my other videos, I mentioned that not all names stay the same. So when they're mentioning some of these names like Gaza, that doesn't mean it's the Gaza Strip of today. As some of my viewers have pointed out, there's also a place along the coast of Africa on the Indian Ocean that was considered to be Gaza. But I'll leave that at there. I just want to continue on with this. For it has havens well situated, which supply its needs, namely that of Ascalon and Joppa and Gaza, as well as Ptolemais, which was founded by the king, and it holds a central position as regards these places and is not far distant from them. Thus the country enjoys everything in plenty, being well watered on every side and securely enclosed. Now he's going to talk about this issue of being enclosed, and enclosed he means by mountains. He'll talk about that. And round it there flows the Jordan, so called, a river which never runs dry. The country originally embraced not less than 60 million acres, although sequentially the neighboring peoples encroached upon it. I looked this up. I think it's interesting. I looked at what the heck is 60 million acres? How do we consider that? So I looked it up in square miles. And so this they're talking about is quite large. It is about the size of Colorado. I'll put up some of the states in the US and show their size in square miles. Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, that kind of size of a state. That's how big this country was. I'm also going to put up here some African places, countries in Africa that would also match more or less for this size. So you get an idea of what kind of size. So we're not talking a land as large as Kenya of our day, which is 2 or 3 times the size he's talking about here. But it would be the size of many other of the moderate-sized nations, and you can see the list here. The next thing I want to mention is that I looked up, and I'm going to post that now. Here is the size of modern-day Israel, including the whole, what they call Negev Desert, all the way down. All the land that would be Israel today is about 6 or 7, 8 in that range, 1,000 square kilometers. So it is not even a tenth. It is a tenth the size of what this person is describing. And so you see that the land that he's describing and the land that we call Israel today, even if you took Israel today and you pushed it out into Jordan and you pushed it up into Syria a little bit, it still wouldn't come close to the size that they're talking about here. But when you're looking in the Africa, and I'll put up this map I always use of Africa with the overlay of the US and China and Europe. Africa, these are small places, small places. So what would appear really large in comparison to Israel, 10 times the size, 10 times the size, is in all of Africa, is still a very small piece. It's not, as I said, even as big as half of Kenya of our day, but it still gives you that idea just how big Africa is as well. It says, thus the country enjoys everything in plenty, being well watered on every side. Again, I want to come back to the Levant of our day, where people say Jerusalem is. It does not have these wells gushing up in Jerusalem at all. There's a small little well that was dug down in, they call it Hezekiah's tunnel and that kind of thing. But it's not what we see talking about here, where the water's just gushing through the temple and cleaning away thousands of animals' blood all the time, continual water flow. And it says that this water, this area or this land is well watered. It's talking about tons of herds and tons of palms and tons of olive groves everywhere and fruit trees and farming, huge farming areas. And that was not the Levant at all, never was, up until irrigation came in our day. And even still, it's still not that. So look at the size of the Levant and look at the size that this person is describing and go, okay. And then we'll look at the mountains and we'll look at some of the other things. And around it there flows the Jordan, so-called, a river which never runs dry. The country originally embraced not less than 60 million acres, which I explained, although subsequently the neighboring people encroached upon it so that the 600,000 men became possessors of lots of 100 acres each. So they had 600,000 men working on the land. And the river, like the Nile, is swollen about the time of harvest, which is one of the quotes we did when I did my video on the Jordan River. That was one of the things we discussed about this swelling and the size of the river. And it irrigates a large part of the land. So it overflows its banks and irrigates the land like the Nile does. But the former discharges its water into another river in the district of the people of Ptolemais, while the latter empties itself into the sea. And there are other so-called brooks flowing down into the plain and embracing the parts about Gaza and the region of Azotus, and surrounding as the country is by natural defenses. Invasion is difficult and impracticable for large numbers because of the passes are narrow, being flanked by steep cliffs and deep defiles, and the whole mountain range which surrounds the entire country is of a rugged character. So we get that. Let's go back again to the map of Jerusalem and Israel of our day, where we say Jerusalem is. Do we see mountain range surrounding the whole area? No, we don't. There are a few mountains. There's a few decent sized, what you'd almost call a mountain or a large hill. But mountain range, no, they don't have that at all. And flanking it on all sides and protecting it, that's not there at all, not happening. So we have to decide, is this person that was writing to almost 2,250 years ago, are they credible? Some people believe this, some people think that they were exaggerating, that kind of thing. But really, it holds up pretty well, in my opinion. It was further reported that in former days there were copper and iron mines in the neighboring mountains of Arabia. And remember that Arabia of our day doesn't mean it was also the Arabia of their day. Doesn't mean that couldn't have been on the other side of the Red Sea. But where Arabia is, where names are, it's like the Negev Desert. Was that really where it is today? Or Jerusalem, or any names of almost any place? Just look at any place in the world, just look at the Sea of Galilee, which, we go, okay, what is there? that name, was that really the Sea of Galilee? I did a video on that. Or is the sea or the inland sea of Lake Turkana or of Lake Victoria or any of the other great humongous lakes that are in the Kenya area? But anyway, let's move on. But the working of these ceased at the time of the Persian rule, as the overseas of those days spread a false report that the working of them was unprofitable and expensive, in order to prevent that country from being spoiled for the sake of the mining of the aforesaid places. So one of the things that we run into, of course, in the Jerusalem area is the gold and the silver that's discussed in the Bible with King Solomon and David, and the riches and the mining and the artisans and all that. And in the Levant, there aren't any real amount of mines of any sort at all. Down in south of Egypt, there are, but not in the area of the Levant. It's actually quite poor in terms of minerals and riches that way. And then it goes on, and he talks about, goes into why they did about Jewish literature and why they needed to have it in Alexandria, because this is at the time when they are putting together the Septuagint and translating from the Hebrew from these people that live in this place, Jerusalem, before it's destroyed 300 years later by the Romans. They're talking about these 72 elders or scribes that are sent to work and do the translation into Greek. But this, I wanted to go through this document because it's not something I had ever read myself, and I thought I'd share it with you because it's fascinating, right? It's just fascinating. And I'm going to leave a link, like I said. Please go and read it yourself. It is worth reading if you have the time. Thanks for all your comments, and please give it a like. I think it really helps the video if you can give a like where you can. And if you feel to comment, I really appreciate all the comments, and it helps with the videos as well. Here's a video I just did on some of the languages and type, and there's another video I just did that you might enjoy as well. Thanks, and have a good day. Take care. Bye-bye.